So tonight, Terry will be speaking with us about the JS Seaverns. And it's quite exciting, I'll say, because I received the presentation. And it's funny because John and I both said we didn't look at it because we didn't want to spoil anything for us. So I'd like to turn it over to Terry, and I welcome you to the Ontario Underwater Explorers virtual dive tonight.
Awesome. Thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate the invitation. You know, I'm glad that we're able to do these virtual talks because it at least allows us to stay connected. You know, and one of the things that's kind of been a result of the COVID is that we've certainly kind of re-explored or rediscovered some of the local dive sites that we have in Canada. You know, and last summer I had a lot of plans to do some stuff in the US, and I literally just dove in my province. But when it takes 16, 17 hours to drive across your province, there's lots of stuff to explore. So I wanted to, you know, I've done this presentation one other time, but I wanted to share it with you guys because it's a wreck that it's really quite cool. But not a lot of people know too much about it or where it is. It's up in Lake Superior, so I'll kind of share that with you. But this is one of those wrecks that we kind of stumbled across through some connections, and we've had a couple of years of documenting. It's absolutely fascinating wreck. So I've got a PowerPoint. We'll kind of go through the PowerPoint, and then at the end, if you've got questions, we can go over those, and then just have some general discussion. So now I'm a sales guy, so I don't do a lot of flashy PowerPoints. It kind of gets straight to the point, you know, and so there's no animation or anything here. But and I'm also a diving instructor, so it's kind of like the old NAUI where it's you know, objective, introduction, body, summary. So so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Seaverns. It's kind of an interesting vessel. It changed names a few times. We'll talk a little bit about the sinking of the Seaverns, the discovery of it, and then the JS Seaverns as it sits today. So this wreck is pretty old. It started life as a side-wheel tug, actually called the J.P. Ward, in 1857, and was used as a boom tug on the Saginaw River until 1865 when it caught fire. The hull was salvaged, and at that time it was converted to a passenger freighter around 1880. It's 130 feet long, 173 gross tons. And in 1884, it was sold to Canadian interest. And what was interesting about this vessel was it was primarily running from Sault Ste. Marie up along the eastern shore of Lake Superior, up and around all the way to Thunder Bay. But its primary responsibility was to service the various railroad establishments along that sort of the north shore of Lake Superior. And of course, we were fascinated by that history when we were chasing down and trying to find CPR 694, because it all kind of ties in with, you know, the Herculean effort that was done to build that section of railroad. So it's kind of neat. And when we explore it, there's a lot of artifacts in there that, you know, speak to what it was doing when it sank, you know, supplying these ports of call. So ironically, it didn't go down in bad weather or anything. They were docked in Michipicoten, and I got a map coming up to show you where that is shortly. May of 1884, it was in harbor, and they were basically backing out, hit a rock, and they realized that they couldn't stop the ingress of water, and they abandoned ship. And they weren't very far offshore, and so they abandoned ship, and it was, you know, they lost all the cargo and everything, which was at that time was valued at $20,000, but no loss of life. So what's kind of interesting, the photo kind of down in the bottom right shows the Michipicoten harbor, and you can see a lot of lumber, and they were using they had a lot of package goods going up. You have to remember, in those days, there's really only two things that connected, you know, Southern Ontario and Northern Ontario. One was the water and one was rail. And so these package freighters became extremely important. And, you know, we've also been exploring a wreck called the Manitou off Griffith Island off Colpoys Bay off in Wyerton. And same kind of stories. These guys, these ships were doing a lot. They were the workhorses of the maritime effort there back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So what's kind of interesting with this is on the photo, the upper left photo, you'll see the center section there is filled with lumber. When it sank more like the photo in the bottom right. So it was actually enclosed through that center section of the wreck. And you'll see that when we show the photos. So it was converted to be more of a package freighter when it sank than it was just kind of open and hauling lumber. So where is it? You know, a lot of people wonder where Michipicoten is. Well, you kind of go from the Sault Ste. Marie up to Wawa. And just before Wawa is where Michipicoten Harbor is. So if we kind of zoom in a little bit closer here, there's Wawa, and Michipicoten is literally it's a harbor as part of Lake Superior just before you get to Wawa, like literally within 5 kilometers of Wawa. So a lot of First Nations in that area. An absolutely gorgeous area. The Michipicoten River kind of snakes out. It's probably close to 8 kilometers before you actually get out into the harbor. And there's a lot of sand there, and they get a lot of sand kind of moving across this sandbar. So it's kind of tricky to get out in there. We go out of a place called Bucks Marine, and obviously lots of fishermen, lots of people looking for whitefish. But it is kind of tricky getting out there. But once you're out in the bay, it's absolutely gorgeous. And the total run to where the site is probably, it might be 6 kilometers. It's not that far from shore. So some of you may have heard, it was discovered actually in 2016 by Ken Merriman, Jerry Eliason, Dan Fountain, Nick Lincoln, and Craig Smith. And when some of you may or may not be aware of Ken Merriman. Ken and Jerry are based out of Minnesota. They're avid shipwreck hunters. They've discovered all kinds of stuff. They were the team that discovered the Manitou and the Jones back in 2018. They've discovered other stuff along the way, but it was Dan Fountain that kind of had heard about this wreck and got the interest of Ken and Jerry. They're both retired, but they've basically made all their own gear, but they can do side scan, and they've got sort of 3D imaging capabilities. So they're really cool guys. And we found out about it through Ken because me and a couple of guys assisted Ken with some documentation of Manitou when they found that in 2018. But when they first discovered this in 2016, they had put some YouTube video up, and it just said the Michipicoten wreck, and that was all it was said. And there was really no reference in terms of kind of where it was other than Michipicoten area and how deep it was and so on. So Ken very graciously gave us the numbers, and our first expedition up to it was in 2019. So we explored it in 2019, 2020, and our goal was really just to get more photos and further document the condition of the wreck. So it's sitting upright. It sits in 155 feet of water. Visibility is typically around 30 feet. I'm not sure how many people are sort of familiar with Lake Superior conditions. It's my favorite Great Lake, but primarily because there's absolutely no zebra mussels in the lake, in Lake Superior at all. But the visibility it's not like what you would see in Huron, certainly not like you'd see in Tobermory. So it starts to get dark, pretty dark about 160. So we're, the bow here, we're right at 155. So I've still got reasonably decent ambient light and reasonably decent visibility. But anything that's painted or it's just none of the artifacts have any mussel coatings on them at all. So when you're exploring these wrecks, it's really as it sank, it really has been very little deterioration. So the top deck has blown off. That section, if I kind of go back real quick. I'm sorry to do that, but the section, the back section there that you see there has blown off on the upper left. And it blew off to the side, so it's kind of laying off the port side. But otherwise intact. So the bow is very cool, very sharp bow, still intact. And just off, we're off to the starboard side here. We've got a really cool, a massive wheel, really cool. And what's also kind of interesting is the anchors. And these anchors were set up similar. I probably can't use, I don't know if you probably can't see my mouse, or can you? Probably not on the
We can see your mouse.
Oh, can you? Okay, thank you. So in this section here, what they would have done, there's another wreck in Lake Superior that's like this. It's called the Osborne. And what they did with these anchors was to be basically a board that would run along here that would come down, and it would make sure these anchors didn't slide off. And then when they wanted to deploy the anchor, they would lift this piece of wood up and they drop anchor. So it's very similar to the Osborne in that sense. You can't really make out the board here other than just this one left side here. But again, there's absolutely no coating on the anchors at all. Part of an old stove. You can see on the main deck area, like the top portion of this has been pretty badly damaged when it sank, so the air escaped and blew all the top off it. But the deck below, as you go inside it, is very cool. So you can see, when we go in there, as soon as we go in, there's a big hatch on the starboard side. We go in there and immediately there's just stacks and stacks and stacks of dishes everywhere. So there's a stack of dishes here. There's massive amount of dishes behind it. Up in the forward companionway, there's dishes. And then just kind of to the right of those dishes, we think it's an old wood plank. And then there's a photo that I don't think I included this, but looked like it was some old, like hides, almost like leather hides. As we move a little bit farther back, there's still barrels of food products that have stayed sealed, and they're floating on the ceiling here. And there's this area. This is what I was kind of referring to. These, it almost looked like a hide or some sort of leather. And then on the stern, the very back part of this deck is still intact. And then you can see just kind of forward of this is where it's been blown off. But as we get a little bit closer, you can actually kind of just make out the A on the Seaverns. So, the white paint, this is 130, 140 years old, and we can still make out a little bit of paint. The area right beside it, when it sank, it come pretty much straight down. So it's a fairly silty bottom. So it kind of bathtubed almost in the bottom. So there's a sandbank that kind of comes up on each side of it. So that summer that we were up there in 2020 last year, it was kind of what I called the summer of the whistles, because we were up exploring the Guinelda, the Hart, and the Seaverns, and I seemed to have a fascination that summer with whistles, and I was taking photos of the whistles off these various wrecks. And this one was kind of cool because it was a triple stem whistle, and it was very well hidden. And we were swimming across it, and it was just the green kind of caught my eye, and so we were able to get a nice little snapshot of that. And then kind of right beside that was the remains of an old desk mirror, like a little vanity mirror. And that's really as far as we got with it so far in 2 years. We've done a lot of photos with it, but we still want to go back and do more. So this is some of the references. There was some good stuff in the Bowling Green State University. And the Smithsonian Mag, Scuba News had some stuff on it, Wikipedia. But I did want to, do a shout out, Ken and Jerry. If you ever Ken does occasionally speak at some of the shows, and he's a fantastic storyteller, really, really, really good. And Jerry, him and Ken are just dynamite people. Paul Turpin is he's been our guy up in Lake Superior. We've chartered with him for over 20 years. He finally retired last year, but he had 20 years of really fun exploration on the North Shore Superior. And then also Brad Buck at Buck's Marina. He was really helpful and allowed us to launch out of his marina. So that was really cool. So that's I know it's a fairly short presentation. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, if anybody wants to ask questions, unmute yourself and
I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Okay. Terry, thank you very much. One of the things I find interesting is there's always new stuff to be found. And, this is fairly recent. I remember my early days diving when the Arabia was the most recent sort of old ship that was found, this kind of on the same plane. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, any questions? If you don't want to ask them, you can put them into chat as well in text.
Well, what about when you get up there and like how long do you normally go, Terry, in accommodations and things like that?
So what we typically do when we're doing Superior, now that we've got a few wrecks that we can explore, you got to remember from Sault Ste. Marie around to the Guinelda site is probably about close to 8 hours drive. So it's significant. There's significant distance between the wrecks. But what we've been doing the last couple of years is, we just take a week off and we'll travel up on the weekend. We'll start diving probably Monday through Friday. And we'll do maybe a couple days in the Guinelda, a couple days in the Heart, maybe hit the Locomotive. And then we'll usually hit the Seaverns on the way up or the way back, especially on the way back, because then we're that much closer to Sault Ste. Marie. And the way we kind of do it now is we would travel up and we'd overnight at Sault Ste. Marie. And then from there, it gives us a nice stopping off point. We can kind of rest up and we used to have, when we were much younger, we'd hammer it straight through for about 13 hours up to Rockport, but nobody's keen to do that anymore. A dive plan. So the question about, so dive plan. So we were doing it on rebreathers. This certainly is not a depth of a wreck that you'd need to do it on a rebreather. We were using it for some of the deeper stuff. We actually got on rebreathers when we were looking for the train. So we were doing on the rebreather 35 minutes on the bottom, and that gave us a pretty nice long dive. And then we were probably about an hour and 20 minutes total run time, including the time on the bottom. So the nice thing is the thing with Superior is it's better to go late in the season, let that water warm up. We've been up there in July and it's absolutely just bitter cold, because Superior, a lot of times the ice isn't off the lake until June. So it takes a while for it to warm up, but we had good conditions. We were probably mid 50s Fahrenheit, coming back up through Deco. So, and Scott, I think you might be right on that. Somebody else corrected me one other time on Facebook with the mirror. So, but I couldn't remember how they corrected me. So thank you.
What's the usual bottom temperature?
Bottom temperature will normally we're normally around 40, 41.
Okay.
So, but no different than if you were diving the Arabia, same kind of bottom conditions. We'd like to try and get a bit of relief when we're coming up and doing decompression.
And when you say later in the season, do you mean
August?
October, August? Okay.
Yeah, August. Pretty much the month of August is a great time to go up there. You still have good conditions, good weather conditions. and you get some nice temperatures. And when you're that far north, actually, like late July, you get a lot of hours of daylight. Somebody
Any
had asked,
thoughts? Any
sorry?
thoughts about doing photogrammetry on that wreck?
I'm sure somebody will. I'm not sure I'm talented enough. I haven't figured out how to do that. It would be a great wreck to do because it's
I
pretty,
have a working relationship with Trent University.
okay.
I did a bunch of training with one of their archaeology department,
Mhm.
and they actually have a lot of resource in the back end. All we need is to get divers down, take video or photos, and they can do the rendering for us.
Well, that'd be awesome. That would be a really cool wreck to do. That would be one of the ones I'd really like to do.
Yeah,
Now,
because the
mind you,
vis is pretty good.
it's generally pretty good. Yeah, like what you saw in those photos is typically what we'd see, probably 30, 35 feet. So,
Okay.
you could see a decent distance. You couldn't see it end to end, but you could certainly see, you can see pretty much all the way across it. So, kind of gear. So dry suits we were using, and pretty much most of the people I dive with just using like the Fourth Element Arctic underwear, and that seems to work pretty good. We also will run heater vests as well. Not so much that we needed it on this particular wreck, the shallower ones, but when we do some of the deeper ones, our run time is a little bit longer, and it just gives us some relief. Somebody else had a question about thermocline. So the thermocline, we hit this one in 2019, 2020, we were hitting it about 60 feet, which was really nice. It was, by August, you're getting thermoclines down a decent depth and Superior. So it was quite nice. Sometimes earlier in the seasons, you might not get a thermocline till the 20-foot stop. And that's a little bit harder to swallow, but
Terry, one of the scenarios you provided was that as they were backing out, they hit a rock.
yeah,
They went down fairly close to shore. Now it's sitting in 150 plus feet of water. So is there quite a bit of a drop off right there, or did it somehow drift a bit?
it's farther offshore than it's probably, and without the map, I wouldn't be able to show you, but it's a little bit farther off from where what they call the government dock is. It's probably 2 miles off that dock.
Okay.
So I think what they tried to do is they tried to bail it for as long as they can, and then it sank. But Superior is funny that way. It's where the locomotive site is. It is a real sheer drop off. You go 100 yards from shore and you're in 500 feet of water. Like, it's really, really steep. So, and the Gunnell is kind of funny that way as well. It actually ran aground. It hit a seamount, but it's sitting in 270 feet of water. So you have this one pinnacle, this one wall that sticks up in the middle of nowhere, and everything around it's quite deep. But how many is there? Just a quick question: is there many people that have gone up to Lake Superior, done any diving up there? I know it's not typically. Yeah, Ian, you've been up. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You've been.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah. If when the challenge is a little bit that some of the stuff is a little bit deeper, but there is some stuff that's not as deep. Especially, you get up, and even like Thunder Bay and even off Rossport, there's some shallow stuff that's like 80 feet of water. If you and Shirky hits on a good point. If you do ever get an opportunity, there's some real nice stuff off Isle Royale. There's a guy by the name of Ryan Staley runs a charter there. It's Isle Royale Charters, I believe. And there's some deeper stuff, but there's some sport diving stuff there, and that's absolutely fabulous diving up there.
Yeah.
So.
Linda, I think it was Linda that reported that she was has dove around the islands at Thunder Bay.
Yeah, because there's Wally has a dive shop up there. Shirky knows Wally quite well. So
They're finding stuff all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you know, one of the things that amazes me is just the drive from Sault Ste. Marie to Wawa. You almost think you're in a different country completely, because that drive is one of the most, it's 200 kilometers, and it's the most beautiful landscape I think that Ontario can provide. You know, you go up hills, and you come down a big hill, and you'll be around the lake, and there'll be bays, you know, sandy beaches. It's just, it's unbelievable, really, until you've done it once. You know, it's hard to imagine that that's in our province.
Wow, this has been wonderful. Any other questions? Terry, you're welcome to stay. Our virtual dive usually goes till 9 o'clock. Sometimes we talk about nothing. Sometimes we talk about everything. As I mentioned, some people are planning to dive on Sunday, so we might talk a little bit about that. But are there any last questions?
Well, I do appreciate you guys inviting me on. It's nice to keep people engaged in the sport, and you know, even talking about it through this COVID thing. You know, hopefully we can get back to some sort of normal.
Oh, for sure, for sure. We're still diving. We've got a pretty good dive charter schedule this year. Our dive director has us going to Tobermory twice. We're doing Brockville, Picton, and of course, we're going to get out to some of those little pickup shore dives around. So that's pretty exciting. I
Yeah,
want to thank you for sharing this with us. Like I said, I didn't look at the presentation because I didn't want to spoil it, and I'm glad I didn't. So that was great. Thank you.
all right, thank you guys. I might stick around, because if you guys are diving, I might want to hear about that. So
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.